From our perspective, three things are essential. We need to rebuild that internal capacity within national defense, reduce reliance on contractors and subcontractors, and strengthen the transparency and accountability. If we do not fix the system, its structure, its accountability, and its capacity, we risk sending money out the door that does not achieve outcomes for our country. So the real question is whether we continue down this path or take an opportunity to course correct.
You mentioned concerns about contractors taking on particular jobs. You talked about lack of responsibility, lack of oversight. You gave a Wainwright example. Could you help us better understand the scope of this problem? What percentage of contractors are we talking about? And give us some concrete examples of some of the problems that have happened because of what you have seen. That's the first question. And then for both of you, the new DIA will be taking over some of the procurement. What specific suggestions, really specific, do you have to avoid these kind of problems?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, I think that we have a lot of issues. So as I said, Wainwright was just one example of many. And honestly, I could tell you name a base and I can tell you where a problem is that we've had. That's a significant problem from a contractor. So we can look at, it wasn't just that long ago where we had the explosion in Comox, where the contractors were working on the housing for the military, and they didn't do the appropriate checks, and their equipment hit a gas line and it exploded, resulting in numerous injuries, and very fortunate not a death. You know, like there's challenges with that. I'm from Suffield, Alberta, where I worked in the counterterrorism center. We had a indoor training arena set up so that we could use live chemical and biological agents, and they didn't put in this appropriate filtration system in the arena, leaving it so that we couldn't get approved by OPCW to have that live agent training in there, nor would we meet the environmental standards. I can also pull on the fire hall in Suffield, Alberta, where they had developed a brand new fire hall, which was great because our previous one was filled with asbestos and there was a number of difficulties there. And they built this fire hall, but they built it so that it was accessible. Well, when you think about firefighters, they're typically larger than average personnel, and they were working in a building that was purpose-built for an accessible firefighter when they would never pass the fitness test to become a firefighter. They built it for somebody who will never actually exist, ignoring all the people that do exist. And so I could just go on and on. I mean, in Halifax, we have structures being built over entrances so that when parts of the building are decaying and falling on top, that it provides protection from those that are walking in and out of the buildings. Like, in Esquimalt, they had a big gate being built to get rid of the security where you'd be able to use passes and just go through this turnstile. But they built it so small that people couldn't manage to get through there. It wasn't accessible. And people were having their rucksacks and wouldn't be able to walk through with their rucksacks. Like it's just ongoing. And it's every single day, all the time we have these issues. And the challenge is that they're not being built by the people who have to deal with the outcomes, that care about whether it works. And that's what we need to do. And that's what we had when we had that internal capacity within national defense. When we had our thriving maintenance offices, base maintenance offices, when we had all of our tradesmen in there, we were able to fix things. We were able to work on things and get it repaired right away. But this immediate reliance on on contractors has stopped all of that, and it's just become this massive money pit where nobody's happy at the end.
Thank you. And thank you to our witnesses in person and joining us today as we carry on with this procurement study. I think I'm going to start by going back to a little bit of something that we learned, that we were reminded of last week, and that is the part of this buying Canadian policies in our new DIA. We heard from other members of the industry last week that while the DIA will put buy Canadian, focus on contracts over $100 million, there are many procurement contracts that fall below this number. So for these procurements, Canadian industry, we heard, feel that they're not even known of. They're not even getting a chance to get at the table, much less building for the Canadian Armed Forces. So I'm wondering your thoughts on this, and I'll open it first to you, Ms. Winger, and then to our guests online. What your thoughts are on this? Do you agree with it? Do you disagree on it? And why you think there is that perception out there?
Yeah, well, I think that I do want a Canadian policy, right? I want to see Canada thrive, and I want to see the money stay in Canada and the workers really be able to thrive. But I think this has to be done with a very strategic, thoughtful approach. And I think right now the race is on to get the money out the door, and I'm concerned with what that's going to look like in 10 years, 15 years, even 5 years. And so when we look at those contracts that are under $100 million, it's not always that newsworthy, interesting, but it really impacts the workers, it impacts the Canadian Armed Forces, and it broadly impacts their families as well. Like when we go back to the Wainwright example, sure, we had all those problems, we have all these additional costs, but we have those children that were sitting in rooms with mold on the wall, and the CAF members that were relying on the department to be able to provide a safe place for their children to be sitting. So now they have to wonder, well, where is the priority here? You know, so I think that it's really important that we really take a strong look at what we're doing, how we're spending that money, and making sure that we're doing it appropriately. And I know I'm the union rep at the table, I get that. And so you can probably predict what I'm going to say here, but you know, I've worked on too many trials where we just stop everything because the machinist has been laid off and we don't have a machinist anymore. So now we have to wait for somebody to go take something down to Medicine Hat and get our widget fixed or created or whatever. And that's going to take 2 weeks, 3 weeks, because we're not the oil field companies and we're not going to get the priority that they get. And so it just continuously perpetuates the problem, right? And it compounds. And so when you look at the under $100 million contracts, it's every day. It's in everything that we do, and it's avoidable.
What risks do procurement and in-service functions rely heavily on contractors as opposed to public servants? So can you speak to some of those risks? You already highlighted a few places in Wainwright, a few other places, but are there other risks?
Yes, we've certainly seen risks. We've seen challenges where we're having difficulties with security clearances. So we know that there are contractors that are entering secure areas without the adequate clearance because they are their company is being approved already for the clearance, and that becomes a problem when they have new employees. There's a significant backlog on achieving these clearances, especially when we get to the higher levels like top and super, and so that becomes very challenging. But I mean, there's all sorts of issues with just being able to also not have the the work that we need, the support that we need. So while we talk about whether the contractors are doing the work properly or whether it's being fulfilled in its entirety, it's the consequence of that, just as you're trying to point out, right? So, I mean, when I think about my training and we are out doing some testing, that could lead, 5 NATO allies just sitting out in a field waiting a week while we're waiting for the widget to come in from, Joe's machine shop downtown, and so these just become constant burdens for us. And then the result of that isn't just that we're sitting around, but that work's not getting complete. We're not getting the outcome of that trial. And I'm sure you can see where that would go to.
Buildings also. Can the procurement progress be modified in order to reinforce internal supervision and reduce these kind of design errors, and to ensure that the work that is done by contractors respect the various operational standards? And maybe you don't want to have subcontracting.
It's really important that when we do have contractors, and I do agree that contractors are required. I mean, we need them for surge capacity. We need them for specialized skills that we wouldn't otherwise be working with. And when we do have them, we need to make sure that we have the appropriate personnel who are qualified to review the work and make sure that it's being done appropriately. So, for instance, when we think of DCC overseeing a contract, they'll have probably an engineer and degree, and they'll be coming in and making sure the work is being done. But they don't have the expertise that our brother here from IBEW probably has, where he can talk about exactly what the code is with electrical. And, when we look at the welders, they'll be able to say exactly what the challenges are with plumbers and such, right? So being able to coordinate that together, I think would go a long ways in making sure that those who are going to be caring for the and maintaining the facility afterwards fully appreciate how it's being built and are able to have confidence that it's being done appropriately, rather than just having somebody who's doing their very best but simply doesn't have that knowledge to be able to make those recommendations.